Hi, so in this video we're going to learn how to find confidence intervals with unknown population parameters and how to find the standard deviation. So first let's start with the problem. A survey of 26 college freshmen found that they averaged 6.85 hours of sleep each night. A 90% confidence interval had a margin of error of 0.497. What are the lower and upper limits of the confidence interval, and what was the standard deviation given that the population parameters are unknown? So let's start with our sample size, which is given in the problem to be 26, and then our mean is 6.85. Our confidence level is 90%, and our margin of error is 0.497. So now we can find alpha. To find alpha, you take 100% and you subtract your confidence level of 90%, so that would be 10%, which is 0.1 as a decimal. So now we can go on to answering part A, the lower and upper limits of the confidence interval. So let's start with the lower limit. To find the lower limit, you take your mean or your average and you subtract the margin of error. Then for the upper limit, you take the mean and you add the margin of error. So you get 6.353 and 7.347 as your lower and upper limits of the confidence interval. So now we can go on to finding the standard deviation. So in order to find the standard deviation, we're going to work backwards from the margin of error equation. So we already know our sample size of n, we already know the margin of error, and we're finding sigma, the standard deviation. So what we need to find is our t-score. So how to find a t-score on Excel, you use the equation t.inv.2t, because it'll be a two-tailed test, and then your probability is alpha, which is 0.1, and your degrees of freedom. To find degrees of freedom, you have your sample size and you subtract 1. So it's 26 minus 1 is 25. Our t-score is 1.708 rounded. And now we can find sigma. So what we're going to have to do is rework the margin of error equation so that sigma is where the margin of error is. So instead of dividing by the square root of n, we're going to multiply margin of error by the square root of n. And instead of multiplying by t, we're going to be dividing by t. So we take our margin of error, and we're going to be multiplying by the square root, and in Excel that's SQRT, the square root of our sample size. And then we're going to divide that by t. And we get 1.484. So that is how you find your confidence interval and standard deviation when the population parameters are unknown.